the logistics. So go ahead.
Okay, so we're here today to talk about Poplus, about how it came about how what the Federation is planning on doing. And with us to talk about this today, we have Tom Steinberg, who's the director of My Society, Pablo Collada, who is the director of Fundación Ciudadano Inteligente. We also have, joining us in a little bit, we will have Andres Nikoski from Cargografias in Argentina, Paul Lenz, who will be talking about Your Next MP, and Khairul Yusuf, who will be talking about the Sinar project and their use of Poppet in Malaysia. So, Tom, if you want to introduce your presentation on Poplus with Pablo, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Tom. I'm from My Society, and me and Pablo here. Say hello, Pablo. You got to unmute, Pablo.
Hello, everybody.
So we are jointly presenting to you from two different continents today, because this is the modern world. And what we're going to do is we're just going to give a background on what Poplus is and why it exists, and it's going to be at a slightly higher level. The speakers coming after us will give you more examples about individual bits of technology and so on. So, what, in short, is Poplus? I imagine you've probably got some kinds of ideas, otherwise you might not be on this call. But it comes from a motivation, or it comes from two motivations, really. Like most good things in life, Poplus comes from identifying a problem. And the problem that we identified is that all over the world there are lots of people, lots of activists and concerned citizens and journalists who think that digital civic activism is potentially a very good thing. Building websites that hold power to account, that increase the transparency on decision makers, that help members of the public to get stuff done, to get problems solved in their communities. These things are awesome. We think they make a real difference, and we know that all over the world there are people who are keen on making versions of these things that are right and helpful for the people who live in the towns and the regions and the countries where they live. But while that's the positive motivation, we have a negative one, which is that because so many people are trying to do projects like this in many countries, websites that give citizens some power and some tools and some services, we noticed over time that it was quite easy to waste very precious resources, where you would have people building quite similar projects in different countries. All of the people building these projects would tend to be, have very modest resources. These would not tend to be very rich people, and they would tend to be using a lot of their time and a lot of their money to rebuild the same thing again and again. And this is really sad, because when that happens, it increases the cost to everybody. It slows everything down. And it also, frankly, increases the probability that someone somewhere will launch a website, and they will try and build a website and it will never launch, or when it launches it will not succeed because they will have spent all of their time and all of their money just trying to launch the site, even though they are doing things that are have been done elsewhere. So Poplus fundamentally is about sharing technology and sharing knowledge between these activists and these journalists and these concerned citizens, so that the success or the success rate of new civic apps and websites around the world goes up. That's really what Poplus is all about: is sharing to help people succeed. And there are I said that it was about sharing technology as well as to sharing lessons. There's a good kind of 50-50 balance, and we really believe that if you try and make technology to share, that you don't tell stories about where it works and where it doesn't work, that's not much good. And if you just tell stories and you just say, oh, we've got this brilliant website, but you don't help people with share the tools, then that also isn't very good. So Poplus is about sharing both tech and knowledge. Now, Poplus specifically is about sharing one kind of technology, because if we tried to just share absolutely everything. That would be impossible. That would be too big. Poplus is mainly about sharing Poplus components, and as this slide says, they are components. They are bits of software that save time and money when building bigger civic or democratic tools. And big is the really operative word there, because Poplus components, each one of them is essentially just a feature on a website. It takes away part of the business of building a full website or a full app, but it doesn't solve your whole problem. Poplus components are not a website in a box that you can just deploy. Poplus components are bits of tech that mean that you can reduce your development time and budget to some extent. And it was May last year that we all met in Santiago in Chile to essentially launch the network and to launch the components. And so today's presentation is a little bit about where we are now. I guess about roughly 8-9 months later on. So I'm conscious that just saying that they're bits of technology that add one feature is not a lot of is not a very helpful description. So I'm going to give a couple, and Pablo is going to give a couple of descriptions of how these things work in practice. So one example of a Poplus component is a piece of technology called SayIt. And SayIt, like all Poplus components, only does one very narrow thing, which is it helps publish transcripts on your site. That's transcripts as in court transcripts or political transcripts or any situation in which you have people whose words have been written down as they are spoken. And all it does is it helps store that data, and it helps publish it nicely so that users can have a nice interface that allows them to get at the transcripts. This is a thing. This business of publishing transcripts has been done before for a long time, but it's not very often been done nicely, and using SayIt, people can have nice transcripts on their website without actually having to spend as much time and effort as would otherwise be required. And here is an example here. So SayIt was mainly built by a development team here in Britain, but this is a website in Canada built by James McKinney of Open North. These people who are speaking here, these are politicians in Canada, and this website is Open House NS, and it is it's a big website that does lots of different things, but one of the things it does is produce transcripts of these politicians. And so what you can see here is transcripts in this website as a feature that is powered by a Poplus component called SayIt. The rest of the website is built by James and I think and possibly his colleagues, and it's not a Poplus component. He's just used one or two of these Poplus components, including I think one called Represent, in order to make a website that has features that he wants to have for his users. So that's a very, very simple use case. One bit of technology, it's built in one country, and it helps someone else build a bigger website in another country. So Poplus components they are slightly more defined than just saying that they do one thing. It's worth running very, very quickly through the 7 features. These features were agreed on by the attendees at the launch of Poplus in Santiago, it's just worth going ever so slightly into more detail. So to help you understand what a Poplus component is and isn't. So one is it's a bit of tech that helps civic and democratic websites. Poplus is about power and politics and so on. If someone came along with a nice piece of technology that was for recording tennis scores or football scores, it would be nice, but it wouldn't really be a Poplus component. It solves a single problem. I just showed you SayIt. SayIt just does transcripts. It just does the publication of transcripts. It doesn't do anything else. So it's nice and small, and by being small, that makes it more attractive to reuse in different places because it doesn't have lots of baggage. It doesn't have lots of features and additional things that people might not want. A Poplus component is composable with other components. That means that, like Lego, it clips together nicely. And I mentioned before how James's site used a component called Represent that is about political boundaries and politicians in Canada, and also SayIt, and then lots of other software that he wrote. But essentially, a Poplus component is always engineered in a way that means it's easy for it to connect with other things. If it didn't, then it would be very hard to build a website off the back of them. It's platform agnostic. That means that it doesn't demand that you have a certain kind of server or a certain kind of software to power it. It also pushes towards the world of APIs. It's country agnostic. This is really important. When a Poplus component is built, it has to potentially work in many different countries in which they speak different languages and have different political systems and different cultural systems. So Poplus components, quite often, they are built in a way that means that people think quite hard about the fact that they're going to be used in different places where people have different systems. It's free and open source. That's fairly obvious. This is not a commercial federation. It's a group of people trying to help each other in a kind of an open source tradition. It doesn't mean for a second that you can't use a Poplus component in a website that's more closed, but it's just these components have to be open up in order to count. And lastly, it has to have a stable and documented API. That is to say that it has to be relatively easy to get data out of a Poplus component if you're a programmer. And so when we are evaluating new components, and people submit new components sometimes, and they say, can my component become a Poplus component? These are the 7 questions that people ask about them. There are a few out there at the moment, a few Poplus components in different levels of maturity. I'm not proposing to go through the complete list right this second, but you saw SayIt, which is about handling transcripts. There is also Popit, which is about holding lists of politicians and candidates and other public figures. There's Mapit, which is about political boundaries. And there's Cuttlefish, the most recent of these components, which is about really good email handling. If you run a website or an app that has to send people lots of email alerts and so on, it helps you do that. So each of these things, really, what they do essentially is people, political boundaries, and email. They're all very narrow, as has been suggested before, and you can mix and match them together. Here's one example of a proper user-facing website. And a little tiny story about how a Poplus component gets used when you're building a real-world website. So we've decided, because I'm in Britain here, that we will play up to national stereotypes. The Queen is leaving the palace. She hits a pothole in her car, and she wants to use the Fix My Street app. Now, Fix My Street is not a Poplus component. Fix My Street is a complete application. It's a big piece of software. It has many features, and it can be reinstalled, but it's a website in a box. But behind the scenes, when someone uses it, they put the pin in the map and they say, here is the pothole, says the Queen. What Fix My Street does is it uses an API and it asks Mapit, which is one of the Poplus components running on one of my society servers, and it says, can you tell me which local government area this pothole is in? And it gets back the answer over the API, and it uses that so that Fix My Street can use that piece of data to send the Queen's pothole report to the relevant local government. And so by breaking Mapit out and having it as a separate piece of software, Fix My Street can be a smaller code base. If Mapit ever went away, Fix My Street could point at a different web service, and it would still keep working. And it also means that Mapit can power the deployment, the instance of Mapit that happens to run in Britain can power Fix My Street, but it can also power lots of other websites because it's a public API. So that's one example of how a big application uses one of these small components in order to work. I am now going to hand over to Pablo, who is the director of Ciudadana Inteligente, who helped found the Poplus Federation, and he's going to talk a bit about one of his projects and how Poplus is going on as more generally.
Thank you, Tom. So we'll keep on with the screen of your presentation. So thanks everybody, Stephen, and then everybody to join in. It's a great opportunity for us to keep on building the community. So keeping up with the examples that Tom was mentioning, I would like to mention very briefly the case of Congreso Abierto, which is an open parliament monitoring tool that we built in Chile, and it's based on Poplus components. So it has basically 2 big components and a third one that is still under construction, and we are still working on it. So it has Popit as a main component as we gather information from the members of parliament in Chile, And then there's this other component that's called write it. So that's a component that's focused on the interaction between members or members of one particular list and the general audience. In this case, the representatives and the audience, or any kind of any person that is interested in interacting directly with the members of Parliament. And it has another component that we've been working on, that is Bill It. And what it does is that it follows up with the bills, the proposals, and the way those three elements, three components, are the base of a big project that we had been working on. And it's a clear example of how we take these three components and build something in a much easier way, and that it can be easier redeployed. And on the other hand, for us, it's easier to just renew every now and then. So passing from that element, we could go to the next slide. And my opportunity is to talk about the community. So who is involved? We've got like nearly 30 countries that were...
Sorry, could I just, quick lesson. I'm not sure if everyone can see the slides externally. So I don't know, Steve, if you're able to just to make sure that the slides are the thing being displayed rather than Pablo. So I don't mean to interrupt your flow, Pablo, but I just had some feedback.
No, don't worry. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I hope that everybody's seeing the presentation and not my face. So who is involved? Okay, so we started working, or both My Society and Ciudadano Inteligente started working, interacting with, as Tom said, different organizations from different parts of the world, and understanding these different challenges, and understanding that we had very common challenges. So last year in Santiago, we had this first conference, or this gathering where people got together. People from nearly 30 countries got together, and since then, this event was in May, if I remember correctly, and since then we've had different gatherings in Transparency Camp, or during important events, Open Knowledge Festival in Berlin, MOSFest in London, the Summit of Code for America, etc. And obviously there's an online group that it's been very active. It has had different times, but it's been very active with more than 350 members from 60 nations. So basically that's the importance, one of the most important elements of Poplus. Obviously it's the components, the technology per se, but technology is useless if there are no users. So the community is one of the most important elements of this federation, a community that dialogues, a community that states its own challenges, and that can exchange its own knowledge. The next, please, Tom. So who is involved? As we said, it was an initiative shared by My Society and Ciudadano Inteligente, and obviously it's important to mention several organizations like Open Earth from Canada, ZeroGov from Taiwan, Congreso Interactivo from Argentina, eDemocracy, SINAR, SimSim from Morocco, and obviously other groups that have been super supportive, Code for America, Sunlight, and Popong from South Korea, that are monitoring the efforts. And this is once again the true value of the federation, its capacity to dialogue. And for example, we've got people from our own organization that happen to be in Asia and got together with people from other organizations. And once again, we have certain common languages based on what Poplus is, in its founding principles. And that's a big element to be shared. It's not only that we share technology, but we share also a set of principles that makes us, give us a much easier language to interact. Why can we share? Why can we interact? Why can we support other people's initiatives? Because we share the basic principles, and I think that's very important.
So, sorry to cut in again, just one quick thing. If people can't see the slides, if they click on Tom's image, then you should be able to see the slides. Just an update for people who are viewing externally. Sorry, Pablo, please continue.
No, great. And Okay, so those are, and for example, we have groups like Code for America, as I mentioned, Sunlight, which are not necessarily people that are developing components, but that are not only in exchanging information and using or eventually using the components, but also monitoring the efforts that we're doing as a community, not the individual organization, but as a community. How is this community of programmers and also different organizations, how is it being impactful? How is it learning from other people's experience? How is it being capable of really decreasing their own time and money investments? So that we still have a lot to learn, but as the community gets stronger and as the exchanges are more common, we will have more elements to keep on growing and keep on strengthening the capacities of the individuals. I don't know if there's another slide, Tom? So just to finish with the presentation, we would like to listen to your projects. How do you think the Poplus components that were spoken before, and that we will have a few other presentations after me, how can you benefit from these projects? And tell us if you're thinking about submitting a project to become eventually a component. If anything that we talked about wasn't clear, and we would be eager to just clarify them. And obviously, it's important not just to hang on to the mailing list, but also to interact, to answer. It doesn't matter if it's a, hey, I didn't understand this, or I don't agree with this, and let's go deeper and let's discuss it. For a community, its most important asset is participation, constant participation, constant interaction, and that's what makes a community valuable. So thank you very much. Hoping that everybody, joins the community, joins us as an active participant, and that we can keep on making the community bigger, making it more strong, and making exchanges more valuable. So thank you very much, and let's keep on with the presentations.
And this is Steve Cliff. I just want to give a quick technical update. I'm the moderator of the Hangout, and my main computer, luckily Chrome, has frozen. So therefore, if you want to see a different, like the slides, for example, or different screens, you'll need to click on the speaker if it's not the person speaking. If that makes sense. So take it away. Go on. Thank you.
So this is about the time that we have some Q&As. So if anyone has submitted any questions, we have a couple. Please do submit questions using the Poplus tag on Twitter. We have a couple. One has come in from Nith. She's asked us, can we give some examples of how Poplus components could be used to make a big difference? So Pablo or Tom, would you like to answer that?
So there's an interesting example going on at the moment in Slovakia, where there is a group who has done good political accountability projects for a long time online, for like 4 or 5 years. And they have been taking SAYIT, the components that's all about political transcripts, and they have been loading in lots and lots of political transcripts so they can add that feature to their current website. And that, to me, is a great example, because those people, they probably had the skills. Like, if they wanted to, they probably could have done it completely on their own without using SAYIT. But by doing so, it saved them some time and some effort. And of course, it means that we have fixed bugs and improved SAYIT, meaning that the next people who come along who are like that will benefit from those. And it's the benefits that come from sharing and reusing software that is just as exciting as the saved time and the saved money.
Thanks for that, Tom. Seeing if we've got any other questions.
Jen, I can help out here. This is Steve Clift. We have a question in about what are some of the largest sites that currently use Poplus components?
So, well, that's interesting. So there are a couple of political monitoring sites in, for example, Kenya and South Africa that both essentially.
Do you want to jump in on that one, Tom?
No, yeah. Well, Tom was answering, so I can just jump in afterwards.
Sorry, I just have the stats at my fingertips that Tom may not have.
Okay, go on.
No, so there's Mzalendo in Kenya, which uses Pop-It. It gets around 35,000 visits a month. The People's Assembly in South Africa, which gets between 15 and 20,000 visits a month, uses both Pop-It and Say It. In the UK, many of our major sites are powered by Map-It, that Tom mentioned earlier, which is one of the Poplus components. So a site like They Work For You gets over 200,000 visits a month. Fix My Street has something like 100 to 150,000 reports made on it every year, and that's powered by Map-It as well. And also you will see the site Write to Them, which in the UK is our most significant transactional site. It gets around 200,000 messages sent to politicians every year, and critically, it uses Map-It in order to direct those messages to the right place, to let you know who your representative is. Tom, I don't know if you want to jump in with any others on that.
I mean, as this call goes along, people who are using these components in other countries may very well want to tell their own stories, but obviously we know a bit more about our own data.
Okay, thank you there. I haven't seen anything else coming on Twitter.
Can I see? There's one here. I have one. So Elf Pavlik asked the question, can you explain collaboration with Code for America and the rapidly growing Code for All network? And let me just broaden that to sort of say, can you explain how collaboration works? What does it mean to be a federation?
Pablo, would you like to have a go? No.
Yeah, well, in the case of, I would talk about the collaboration issues. I have a very specific case of this person from Argentina that's called Martin. No? For example, Martin was a very active citizen. He's a designer, and he was very interested in doing his own parliamentary monitoring website, right? And he didn't have all the developers elements, so he spent a month in Chile with us before the Poplus conference. He spent the time with our developers, understanding the components and building or starting to build his own platform. So in the terms of what does collaboration means, it means the opportunity to share these elements, to share spaces. For example, he came in, he was part of FCI. He was for a month. He spent the time in our office. He learned to use these elements to integrate the different components, and he built his own platform. So in the end, a single person that had this big initiative, I mean, for him as an individual would have been very difficult to build the whole platform from scratch by himself. So he eventually used a lot of things that were developed earlier, that are the components, and he built a much more potent and powerful tool. So that's a very specific case of collaboration. He walked much further thanks to his ability and the ability of the community to interact and to share these things.
Yeah, and on the specific Code for America, Code for All front, I was actually in America last week, and someone who I didn't know came up for an event, and they said that they were from the New York Brigade or chapter, I can't remember, and that they had been closely examining two of the components for a forthcoming project. Now, you know, maybe they will use them, maybe they won't, but essentially. The number one way of engaging, Poplus engaging in things like Code for All and Code for America communities and brigades is simply keep building good software, keep talking about it, keep organizing things like this, keep going to conferences and talking. And really the proof has to be in the pudding. We have to make sure that these components are really good bits of software that make a difference to people, because if they aren't, then no amount of talking will help. It's all about successes, like where, as I said, the people in Slovakia take a piece of code and use it. Those are really the things that I think are most likely to make more collaboration and to bring more people into this federation. The Federation is very loose. You can be a member of the Federation essentially just by saying that you want to be. There's no point in having strict rules and strict regulations and membership at the moment, because we're just a group of people trying to make a thing work. If we put barriers up, there'd be no great advantage to it. Why call it a federation? It's to show that it's not just a project of one organization. It's not just mine. It's not just Pablo's. It's not just someone in Slovakia or Australia or Norway or Malaysia. It's a thing we're all doing together.
Yeah, and in the case of Sunlight, I would like to point out, like, they're doing also research in terms of civic tech. And obviously, Poplus is a point of reference. So if they want to access different experiences, they will get in touch with Poplus and their members in order to just access more information and also be part of this sharing experience, a greater sharing experience from their own perspective, whereas they may not be very eager to develop technology, but all their other knowledge in terms of transparency and accountability, etc., they want to share it with the members of Poplus. So it's a win-win situation, and Poplus becomes a point of reference for other organizations that are doing projects that can eventually add value to the projects of the Poplus members.
Great. Thanks. I think, unless Stephen has got any more questions from people, I think we can probably move on to the presentation, Stephen.
I think we're good. And just for the folks on the stage here, because of the freeze, I'm not able to move video and screens around. So just FYI on that. The one thing I'll just say is that if people ask questions via Twitter, I will make sure to either bring them to the online group for answers or to help tweet them back. So if you're watching this on demand, you can put your questions in with tag Poplus on Twitter, and we'll watch for that and make sure those future questions get answered.
Cool. Okay, so now let's move on to the presentations of the tools that are using Poplus components at the moment. And the first one that we have up is Andres Nitkowski from Argentina with Cargografias.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
I have the slides on my, I'm sharing the slides. I don't know if you can choose them to be streamed on the YouTube. I'm not sure if we are tackling that, but I'm go ahead. So as Jen said, I'm Andres Nitkowski. I'm from Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina. And as Pablo has just said as an example from Martin, that is also here from Argentina, I was looking for a tool to help me out on a project that I was already building, that is Cargografias. And I found out that Popit was going to help me a lot, so I just started looking it up and learning about it, and now it's being used. So let me introduce you guys to Cargografias. Cargografias, it's a tool that we are building to try to visualize the power of states by looking up and visualizing the path or the stories that every politician takes inside of the states, inside of the governments, inside of the parliament. So the main goal of our visualization is to be able to see which role they had, which post they had in every moment of the story of the history of our country for now. So our reference was this great thing that maybe you all saw, that is like a plot line, that is like a mixture between a timeline and like a map. So this was our sketch. It was about how to see which role they had in every moment, and which the relationships between the president or a governor or a senator. And as you can see here, I don't know if you can see my pointer. I think you can. You have like the big red color is like the president. So it's been, of course, different persons has been in the role. This that one was this is like the first sketch that we did in 2011, but we have been growing a lot. So now we are using Popit as a backend. We were using a non-open source backend at the beginning, but then we realized and we met with Popit like few weeks later than the event in Chile. So of course you all know that Popit is open source, open data, and it can use open standards like Popolo. And we are using that so we don't have to deal with all the database issues or to have to pay for a server or something. But we are using the Popit instance as our backend. What we are working right now is to make Cartografias a module to be able to be used in any Popit instance. Cartografias, it's also open source, it's also open data, it's client side, so the idea is to be able to make everything really light, so it's really not expensive to deploy. We are using D3 as the visualization language and Angular as like a framework. And the goal for this tool is to help undecided voters decide their vote, or at least have an opinion about it. Also, it's pointed to journalists and students, or even like political science investigators. We think that Cartografias also can help, as a model, can help Popit instances be refined or checked against consistency. I mean, like you'll see, like I'm going to show you really quickly how it works, but you'll see that maybe it's a good tool to help you refine your own Popit. Also, we were thinking that we should be able, like, we will need some things about Popit that they are not really made right now, and maybe we can actually try to make them, and maybe make a fork of it, or maybe later on add it to the Popit project. So let me just jump into the project itself. You can log it and have a look at it. It's cartografias.org or .org. Right now, what we can do is to look for any politician that we have in our Popit. Let's look at our former president. So it's going to show us all the career of political career of him. We can also look up the actual president, his wife. So we'll see that if we order this like this, it's going to show us how they change from role to role. Let's say from deputy and to governor, or into like president, like here. We are also let me load like a preset, like we can load all the presidents that we had in the last 30 years. What we can do is order them by name, like it's right now, or by role. So this way we can try to figure out things by our own, like the reader or the user should be able to personalize the way of seeing that. We're also experimenting with different visualizations here, but down here we're trying to look at how to measure power and how to compare it. This one was the president, this one was a governor, then it became president, or they both were government at the time. So this is really experimental. We are still working on it. Here's all the rough data and comparisons and like Hall of Fame or something like that. And I want to show you what our great developers are working right now. That is like two main things. One is to revamp the visualization tool to be able to to make better personalization and better things that so the user can work on other things and to add more data or maybe add layers of data on the bottom. Also, we have added like to be able to compare like the careers of the politicians instead of like so we can see when they started on the politics and when they are now. Some of them have a long careers and some of them are really new. The other thing that we are really working on is the ability to be instanceable. So we can do instances of cartographias. That's what we are working right now, and the idea is to have cartographia from different countries. In the beginning, we are working with teams from different Latin American countries. This is in Spanish right now. We intend to translate it to English too, but at the time being, we have teams working on the database on Mexico, Bolivia, Uruguay, maybe Chile, Venezuela, and Guatemala. So they are working on their puppets. So they have just to build a puppet instance for them, and then we have just to connect them. That's what we are working right now, and we have been doing some tests using puppets from Kenya and from Pakistan, and they are kind of working right now. We are really in a beta stage, but we are really confident that they are going to work by probably March. Let me read. There are some questions here. Are they for us? No. Okay. I think I'm done. Let me check if my developers have something to say. No. Okay. Any questions?
I don't have any specifically for you at the moment, I don't think.
This is Steve. If I could ask one quick question. What advice would you give to other projects that might be looking to leverage Poplus from this? So they're coming at this from scratch, and they're not quite sure where to start. Where would you recommend they start?
Well, for me, it was really important to be able to focus on what my project was about. Like, I'm a graphic designer, so what I really wanted to do is visualizations of data. So the project was about that, and all the part of storing the data and deal with it was really something that was taking important work hours from my team. So when I found out that there was these tools that are being able to do that, and they are actually being working it, like they are maintained and they are going to keep growing because they are open source, and there are a lot of guys like many of the ones that are here were developing that tool. That was really interesting because it let me it let me not to reinvent the wheel, but to use it as it is and to work with the tools that are being out there. So I think my best sorry, yeah, I will encourage anyone to use the tools that are already there, so you can focus on the main goal of your project. Like most of the projects out there, maybe can use the Poplus components as like a base to doing something else, and that's where we should focus on the something else, on the thing that we can add to them, so we don't have to redo it again. And I think it's really we are having the Open Data Day like in 1 week, and we are spreading the word about Popit because I think we should all try to use the tools that are available so we can make them grow better and grow fast, so we can keep using them. Also, we are trying, as with Martin, and I think he should be watching this probably. We are trying to make a huge Puppet instance of all the projects that we are working with politicians in Argentina, and I encourage any other watcher that is watching right now in their countries to try to do that, so we don't have to have different Puppet instances for the same subject that is like politicians from your country, so we can maintain one and only instance and make it grow.
Awesome. Andres, when you get a chance, would you mind sharing your slide deck with the Google group? Because a lot of people are saying they're really interested in seeing your slides, and obviously because of the technical hitch, it can be a bit difficult for them to view things at the moment on the Hangout on Air.
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. We also have a comment from Open Steps on Twitter who said they're glad to see that Cartografías is evolving and the module will be really useful for so many contexts, so congratulations.
Yeah, I'll point you all to look at Open Steps website. They are connecting projects like this from all over the world. It's really interesting.
Also, I see a tweet from Tarek Neshnesh who mentioned that he gave a presentation at UNDP in New York about civic engagement, where he mentioned Poplus and sort of asked and made the point about the UN and bringing in other communities. Jen, is there a question from Lorelei about the U.S. Congress?
There is a question from Lorelei in the US Congress. This is sort of a more general question which might be aimed at Tom and Pablo. Lorelei said, I work in the US Congress and the challenge for members is that they don't often have the capacity, staff, or technical knowledge to make engagement technology useful in the policymaking progress. For example, they don't have the bandwidth to read, think, and respond to line edits on a piece of open and published legislation or a policy idea. Do you have a way to sort and filter, i.e. segregate participation or experts with affiliation and then popular opinion?
So I think that the short and honest version of that is that there's not currently Poplus components that do that. So there's no point in sort of pretending. As we just heard about Cartografías, that kind of high quality end user tool that will be really useful is actually the sort of thing that we hope Poplus will help other people to build, right? The purpose of Poplus is to accelerate the number of tools like that get made, and so there's sort of this, at any one point in time, there's two tracks going on in Poplus. There's the track which is those of us who are trying to make the underlying components work, the ones that you may very well never see as an end user because they're just behind the scenes. And then there is the business of building the big applications of the kind that we just had excellently presented to us. So I would say that the way of involving Poplus in that question is to look around for people who might be thinking about building that kind of tool, specifically for people who work in Congress. And if you do find those people, to have a conversation with them in which you say, not only are you interested in it, are you working on it, but do you know about Poplus? Do you know that Poplus may be able to reduce the time and the effort that it takes to be able to launch a website like that in the first place?
If I could ask a general question, I'm going to channel a counselor from New York, a new counselor who, by trade, was a Drupal developer, and Ben Kalos, and he's involved with a network called the Free Law Founders, which is engaged with the OpenGov Foundation. But what Ben said to me was, what we need are turnkey solutions, where you can just push a button, install it, and the politician can have a website or whatever it might be. And I realize that Poplus isn't that. So could you just sort of answer that question for someone who says, I want a turnkey solution, how Poplus relates to that, or may relate to that?
Sure. Actually, sorry, I'm talking too much here. Pablo, do you want to have a go, or in fact anyone else who is on the call here? Maybe even Steve yourself, since you're an expert.
So Tom, I'll take your invitation and help answer that, I guess. Well, the key thing that I said that I've heard you say, Tom, actually, is we'd say that if you had 6 months to build something and now you can do it in 2 months because you're able to then leverage, components and things that people have used, it also implies that you have 2 months of development resources, right? You're trying to build sort of something that's pretty substantial. And the question about whether you want everything sort of just to be a bunch of modules from Drupal or from WordPress or from some other set of tools, I think maybe the answer in that is that for now you have lots of components that do different things in Poplus, but the bigger question is, well, how might they be combined and used together? And there's certainly maybe an audience for Poplus components that are combined into packages of a whole service. Like your next MP in some ways. Right now it uses, I guess, one component, but imagine if that had multiple components and then was delivered as a package.
Yeah. Paul, you might want to talk about Write It, possibly, or Pablo?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. So Write It, which Ciudadano Inteligente are working on at the moment, I think is going to be a really good example in that within a month or two, it is actually going to be much closer to being a turnkey solution if you want a tool for writing to politicians in public. However, it won't be a turnkey solution on its own. You'll also need to set up a Pop-it instance. However, the process of setting up both of those things should be relatively simple and straightforward. So whilst there isn't just one single box that will give you a site that will write to politicians, there are two components that are easy to set up and that in concert will give you a really useful tool. Now, you may well want to do some customized styling on top of that, just in the same way that you probably would with a site that you were running on WordPress. But the fundamental principle of being able to create something that's really quite smart and really quite fast is still there. There's also another point, which is that, as Tom says, this is very much about creating the building blocks. What we're hoping and starting to see, actually, is that other people are building effectively turnkey solutions that are either based directly on the components or based upon the data that they contain. So, for instance, you might want to create a tool that's about political influence tracking, and that could be a turnkey solution, that could be something that you create as a product and you push into the marketplace. However, you don't want to go to all the trouble of constructing a universal database of all of the people within that. You could just use Pop-it as your source of data. So there could be a turnkey solution for something that's about tracking influence, but it sucks information in via the API from an instance of Pop-it that you set up. So that's a long-winded way of saying that both Poplus components can work together to make things that are pretty much like turnkey solutions, but also that you can set up and create new turnkey solutions that are simply a lot quicker and easier to develop and can be reused very readily by using Poplus components as their data source.
Okay, I wanted to quickly move on from there because we have two more questions before we move on to the next presentation, and I'm aware that we are taking up a lot of people's time right now. So, we had another question from Alf, which was saying, we currently work on open source tools for mapping public transport and generating GTFS feeds. How could we start making it a module? So this is, I guess, more generally about how you make a component into a Poplus component.
I wonder actually whether I could possibly put someone on the spot here who maybe doesn't expect to be talking, but who is in this call anyway, who is Mark, because Mark is one of my society's senior developers and might be slightly better placed to answer a sort of an architectural question like that. It depends if Mark is willing. Depends if Mark is even there. He might just be in the Hangout but have gone off to lunch. Okay, well, oh, there he is.
He's here. He's just finding his headphones. 1 second.
I'm sorry, my colleague unfairly on the spot. I hope you can all extend some sympathy.
Hi, I'm sorry. You were saying the question was about how you initially make it into a Poplus, or specifically about transport data.
Well,
you've got GTFS data, and you were thinking what would be a Poplus-ish approach to GTFS data, which is timetable data.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer off the top of my head, I think, for how you would approach that. But there are lots of kind of nice examples of people who've built public transport APIs, such as what Transport API are doing in the UK. So I think that would require a bit of kind of research and thinking too, because it's obviously a lot of work to be thought about what's the right abstraction and how you would model the data and so on. So I don't think I have something off the top of my head which is a good answer to that, I'm afraid. But,
okay, so I'll just talk a little bit about the process that two of the newer components have gone through very recently. Then, so there was a component that was added probably about 5 or 6 months ago called Represent Boundaries, which was created by James McKinney from Open North, and he submitted his proposal to make represent boundaries into a component to the Poplus group, detailing the technical specifications, allowing people to look at the GitHub code, and basically submitting it for review. Then a panel of people from the community got together to have a call about that component, and then they took some changes to James and suggested things that he could do to make the component more useful for the Poplus community, or easier to internationalize, or something like that. And then he made the suggested changes, or kind of looked at the code and decided what he wanted to do and submitted it again, and then was accepted as a component. And this also happened recently with Cuttlefish, which is an email sending tool which was created by Matthew Landau from Open Australia. Similar process, he submitted it to the group with a lot of kind of detail about the technical specification. Again, it was reviewed. Again, some suggestions were made. There's a lot of discussion on the groups, and if you look up these components on the Google group, on the Poplus Google group, you'll see the process that they've gone through and how to make it a component. So the other question that we had in was from Alicia, and she asked, it's difficult to build this kind of movement, a real community based on give and take and open source like ideals. She said she's quite a fan. I guess this is a question on how we've done it. So maybe Paul would like to talk about the beginnings of the Poplus community?
Oh, yep, sure. I think to break the question down slightly, there are probably kind of two big challenges here. One is simply to persuade people of the value of reusing code. I am not a developer, I'm the least technical person in my society, but I am aware that it is often, it takes some persuasion to convince people that actually rather than coding something themselves, it's easier to use something that has been created by somebody else, because it means you have to learn something new. Even if you're familiar with the language and the framework, it's not your code. And so one of the challenges that we've been working really hard to overcome is simply to persuade people that there is benefit and efficiency to using code that's been generated by other people. And that's taken a lot of evangelism, a lot of going out and speaking at conferences and meeting people face to face, and also giving direct support, making sure that we're actively answering questions on the Google group, that we're giving up some of our developer time to help people when they've got technical problems, or indeed when they have specific feature requests and they want some changes to the core product that are going to be beneficial to everybody. So that's kind of one of the challenges, is that kind of persuasion barrier, making sure that you can convince people that it's good to be using other people's tech and that it's efficient and it saves time and money and all of the good things that Tom talked about earlier. I guess the second thing is persuading people that they should be sharing their code and open sourcing it in the first place, because obviously you can't do the first thing without having some code to share. And I think a lot of that comes down to appealing to the general civic-minded nature of people who are working in our sector. It's fortunate that we are trying to do open source technology in the civic tech sector. We are inherently, hopefully, people who understand the value in sharing, in building things together. If we worked for extractive industry companies, then I think it would probably be a lot harder to get people to share their proprietary code. So I guess we have a benefit in that we're kind of pushing against an open door here, in that we have a lot of people who are basically who get it. They get the notion of sharing, they get the notion of building and adding value to a broader community and not just to benefit themselves.
And if I can add something to that answer, I think that Paul very accurately demonstrated like the two big elements that generate one part of the community, which is the developing community or the developers community. And actually that's super important, and that's one part of what Poplus is and what Poplus aims for. But I think that there's another part of the community that's very important, and it's a great challenge for us right now, is to go beyond that developer community. As developers start exchanging, interacting, and yeah, like sharing their own experiences and tools, we need also the consumers of these developments, which I mean members of different civil society organizations or members of either individuals or community members that are interested in using and integrating these components in their own projects. Maybe they're not techie savvy, maybe they're not, they don't have all the elements to understand what these components do, like technically, but they must understand the value of these components in their own big strategies. As we build very good blocks, and these are the components, we need more people in the community that have the understanding of the importance of architecture or building buildings that actually use these components and that eventually can drive greater impacts. So I think that would mean understanding the community as a huge range of actors. On the one side, all the developing and sharing community, and on the other hand, the actors that will use this technology and that will promote this technology for their own campaigns.
Thank you for that, Pablo. So I think we should probably move on now to the next presentation, just so that we can keep things running. So Paul was going to give a very quick 5-minute presentation about Your Next MP, which is a site that's been created in the UK using Poppet at the moment.
Hi there, thank you, Jen. Hopefully those of you who can see the slides have seen this now magically appear in front of you. I'm mindful, however, that some people have just kind of got a locked YouTube screen, in which case in the comments under the YouTube screen there should be a link to Your Next MP, which you can click on, and you will hopefully get some idea of what I'm talking about. If not, hopefully I'll be able to describe it sufficiently well that when you check out the site later, it'll make some kind of sense. So we've got a general election, a national election coming up in the UK at the start of May. It's very exciting. It's going to be very tightly fought, probably the closest, well, easily the closest election in 40 years or so. And when people are making a decision in an election, clearly something that's really obvious and sensible for them to know something about is actually the people they could be voting for. We have a constituency-based system in the UK, so each area of around 100,000 people has candidates from all of the leading parties and some of the smaller ones that people can vote for. Now, you would have thought it would be relatively straightforward for your average citizen to find out who the candidates are standing for election in their constituency. Unfortunately, the British electoral system is a little bit strange. There is not a single central database of all of the candidates, and candidate data is only officially released 10 days before the election. Now, that clearly doesn't give people very much time to find out about the people they should be voting for. There's also the added complication that official candidate data, and this is true in most countries I know around the world, not just in the UK, it tends to be fairly high-level stuff. It'll give you the name of the candidate, the party they represent, maybe their date of birth, but not much other stuff. When you want to find out a little bit more about the person who might be representing you in Parliament, there is a lot more information that you are potentially interested in. Have they been a politician before? What their experience is, what career they might have had, what they're saying on Twitter, what they're saying on Facebook, a whole host of other things. So to solve the problem, both that official information is released very late in the UK and that official information is very slender, there's not too much of it, we've worked to take the Poppet platform and build a crowdsourcing tool that sits on the front of it, and that's called Your Next MP, which is the link that I have shared. Now what this does is make it very easy for people around the country to gather information on the candidates who are going to be standing in their area and sharing it in a central database. They will be getting leaflets through the door already from prospective candidates. They will be able to talk to local party officials, get information that way, and what they'll be able to do is pull together all this local information and put it onto a very simple, straightforward database that runs on Poppet, which means that anybody in the country has the opportunity to find out who their candidate is and find out a little bit more about them. So I'm going to actually type my postcode in to the site now. It's the equivalent of a zip code in the USA. It's just an address code. I could use another way of searching, but this is just the quickest one. And excellent, it's come up with a list of candidates who are standing for election in my constituency. You will see here we've got a total of 7 candidates, and there's actually a little box at the top showing that we don't have the email addresses for a couple of those candidates, so that's giving a little spur to action to other people to go and actually find out that information, add it to the database. If I click on one of the candidates, the person who's the current MP, Nicola Blackwood, you will see there's already quite a lot of information about her here. We can see her Wikipedia page, we can see her Twitter handle, we can see her email address, her party, some age, some gender, some demographics, and also we can see the versioning history here. So that's not something a regular, like an average citizen would be interested in, but it is really useful in providing an audit trail to see how that information has been collected. Now, I should be able to log in if I wanted to change any of this information. I'm not actually going to change it because this is a live site. And I can now go in and just edit any one of these fields. So if I wanted to change the date of birth, if I wanted to add in a Facebook page URL, because there's not one in there at the moment, or a LinkedIn URL, then that would be really easy for me to do. I could just save the changes and I would update the database. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a fantastic tool for sourcing loads and loads of data about candidates, but kind of what is this site for? And the slightly odd answer is that the Your Next MP site is really just about collecting the data. What it does is structure it and serve it over an API, and then it makes it really, really easy for other people to build tools on top of it that can provide much more exciting and sexy data out to other people. So someone has already, or is in the process of building, for instance, a tool that makes it easy to see all the tweets made by people who are standing in your constituency. The way it does that is by taking the Twitter information from Your Next MP via the API and using that to power the tool. It's a nice example of what I was describing earlier when we talked about out-of-the-box tools that are powered by data that's been run off Poplus components. Now, we have a nice little numbers page here, which shows that so far we've got details on 3,032 candidates. A similar project, not based on Poppet, was run in the 2010 election, and then got data on 4,000 candidates by the time of the election took place. So we've got about 75% of the number of candidates that was gathered last year, and we're still sort of 80 or 90 days out from the election. So we fully expect to get more details than we had last time. It's also worth noting that when this exercise was done in 2010, the quality of the data and the extent of the data that was available via Your Next MP was better than any of the information available via commercial sources. Some companies try and gather this data and then sell it commercially to interested parties, but the quality of their data wasn't as good. So this is a really kind of powerful way of demonstrating that these kind of tools can create data that's freely available. It's an open source license that means that other interested civic hackers and technologists and activists can build tools on top of it without having to pay a large sum of money to a commercial company in order for their tool to work. It's clearly something that we'll only use in the UK, maybe once every 5 years, but excitingly, this technology is something that we're very keen can be reused. Obviously Poppet, the underlying component, can be reused really easily, but also we're looking at the opportunities of actually internationalizing the Your Next MP crowdsourcing tool that sits on top of it. And so we've been talking to groups in Argentina and other countries in South America about how we can potentially reuse this technology and have that crowdsourcing element sitting on top of Poppet is something that's used in many elections around the world in the coming years. I could talk a lot more, but I'm mindful of the time, so I will stop now.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so we have, do we have any questions from anyone, Stephen?
This is Steve. I don't see any new questions. There's been some comments about how do we leverage Open Data Day coming up here. And I encourage folks to spread the word about Poplus components to various hackathon teams. in that ideation phase, just getting word out that, hey, let's take a look to see whether there's something we can leverage would be a real win. And then if people who are involved in Open Data Day events would like more information or links, feel free to contact us at hello@poplus.org, as well as the post to the online group. We're very interested, obviously, in how any kind of event, whether it be an unconference, could have a session about Poplus. There's been a number of them already, about a half dozen different parts of the world, and as a way to get face-to-face interaction in this group, that would be good as well.
Okay, if there aren't any questions, then I will move quickly on to Malaysia. I think we have Chi Leong here who can talk a little bit about Sinar project and their use of Poppet and a few of the other components in Malaysia.
Hey guys, I'm Chi Leong. Can you guys see the slide that I shared?
We can. Other people might not be able to, but if you post it later, then.
Okay. This is basically more like a map of currently what we have on what we already deployed. It's just a single slide of a overview of whatever that we are doing right now, and the major components that we work actively with is Poppet, and we have the Your Next MP projects that Paul demonstrated just now is actually quite similar with our My MP projects, which is we're going to replace. So we're probably going to try it out soon. Mapits. Recently we approached quite several NGOs, and we managed to get them to share data with us. And also we've been talking of merging some of our data source to let them to host the data with us. And so we became, instead of writing more codes, we'll focus on deploying Poplus components or Poplus Lite similar components that most of the local groups can use. I think basically that sums it up.
That's great. Thank you very much. So, just for anyone that doesn't know, the Sinar group have been working in Malaysia for a few years, but they are a group of about 3 people. And they've been reusing a lot of different open source software simply because it gives them the opportunity to do a lot more work.
And we also received a grant for half a year of work, so we can afford 4 person doing it full time. So hopefully within the half of this year we'll get more better results.
This is Steve. One comment about that, at least I've noticed, is that there have been many groups around the world that have are beginning to find ways to leverage the Poplus sort of concept or network as a way to attract regional or national funding. This is one example. Maybe there are a couple others that will be emerging down the road. But a big question a lot of people have is, well, does this have legs? And so I don't know if Tom or Pablo would like to answer this, but where do you see this going in the next couple of years? And if someone is trying to attract funding to work with this or whatever, what advice might you have?
Yes.
I'm not
sorry.
Yeah. I think there are different possibilities. I think that there are 2 basic lines of, or 3 basic lines of interaction. One would be joining the community in order to just find some kind of support and saying, hey, I've got this initiative and I would like if anybody from the community could help me address these challenges that I found. So I think that the community would be willing in many sense to just interact, give feedback, and have like more closer interaction, more in the support point of view. On the other hand, there's this other opportunity of saying, hey, I've got this project, I need funding, and how can we work? I think as it happened last year, Poplus had the possibility to give mini grants to people that were interested in either using one component, improving one component, or building a component. So these are possibilities. Last year we had the opportunity as Poplus to fund these small projects. Maybe in the future we will have other opportunities, and hopefully we will. But it's uncertain. And but anyhow, we can just support joint ventures. For example, people that say, I have this project, I would like to, I don't know, like make an alliance with other organization, and let's see what happens, and then look for funds. And the third one would be, definitely looking for funds as a whole community. That's been a question that has been asked several times in the governance committee of Poplus. We've decided that at the moment we will not generate a legal or entity, a new legal entity, but we will keep it up as a confederation, as a cooperative, and we will work in those terms. Basically, one of the rules is if you as an organization are looking for funds to build Poplus components, and you as an individual, then you're free to do it. And if you want to just look for funds for Poplus as a whole entity, then you can do it as well. So it's quite a free and a flexible structure at the moment, that any kind of proposals can be done at the moment.
Yeah, I echo all of that. I would only add probably two things. One is to say, I think, frankly, that if you're thinking of applying for some money for a project and you say that you will be using Poplus components, I really think it actually probably increases your chance of succeeding. I can't promise that because I don't work for a funder, I don't run funding organizations, but I do know that funders love collaboration, they hate waste, they hate seeing things reinvented pointlessly, and they like the idea of everybody working together. So I think it will help make proposals more attractive. The other thing to say is it's probably polite or good form to just tell the mailing list when you're doing that, so that so that the word spreads and you don't have anyone going, oh, I didn't know what was going on over there. So just drop a note to the list going, we have this project, we're applying for some money, and we're mentioning Poplus. That would just be a nice thing to do. But that's all, really.
Okay, I am going to quickly move on to events, which might answer Alicia's question a little bit further about things related to Open Data Day. So if you've been following Twitter stream, you might have seen that Martin Sislican from Argentina, who runs Congreso Interactivo, is thinking of is running an Open Data Day event in Argentina, and I think Andres is also attending that one and presenting cartografías there. I know that there are a couple of other Open Data Day events being discussed about using Poplus components. The Open Knowledge Foundation are running a lot of Open Data Day events, and using Poplus components during one of those could be really it is very simple to set up, and then if you've got open data about politicians, you could put it in and start one for your country, which could be really, really interesting. There are a few other open civic tech events where you might find Poplus group people hanging around at. RightsCon in Manila is one of those. That's in March, the 24th and 25th of March, and a lot of the tech activists from Asia will be there. I think you'll probably find the guys from Sinar there, and there might be a few others. There is a Norwegian Unix users group event on the 8th of May in Oslo, which is more of kind of civic hacking event, and you will find some people from my society there, and potentially a few people from the wider open source community that are also interested in Poplus. If anyone else has any events that they're going to, please do check the Poplus Google group. That's where we kind of post about where you might find us next. And if you see any of us at any events, we'll probably be representing our companies. So do come along and say hello and talk to us about Poplus. Okay. I don't know if Stephen has anything to add here.
Well, I think we're toward the end of the agenda here. The key thing is that this was a chance to welcome new people. For those of you who are watching on demand, the first thing you should do as you finish up is go to the Poplus online group, the Google group. It's bit.ly/Poplus group, and that'll take you right into the Google group. Also, in March is our next scheduled teleconference where it's audio-based, two-way discussion and updates going through the different components and the like. We had our first one in January, so if you want to get even more in-depth, that recording is available. I'll share it on the Hangout page for this event, so people, if they want to tune in and listen in about what we had to say last month, that's also useful. But join us in March, and we'll post it on the Poplus group.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I think we will close the broadcast now.
All right. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, so this is Steve Clift. I'm still here on the recording. I'm doing my best to close this thing down. We had a freeze, whereas the moderator, my Chrome froze, and so I didn't dare touch anything on the main desktop. And so there may be some extended video here, but you can just ignore me in the background as I figure out how to close it up, other than the fact that I'm going to try to just shut everything down, and that may just do it. Thanks so much. Okay.